Hey, what's up, dudes? All right, I'm back, and bro, I have like the brain fog. Oh man, it's like I got this little cold or whatever I call it, and it is bad, dude. Like the brain fog. Like I took a nap, and I just like I don't know. I know they associated COVID with the brain fog thing, but it's like couldn't think straight. I was doubting whether or not I really wanted to do another session, but like I really need to. My mind's not working 100% right now because of this cold. It's definitely dragging me down. But I'm gonna try to get through it. Whoops. Hopefully it's working good enough. Okay, so let's see what we got going on here. We stopped after we were determining what we needed to do next, and I think what we decided was we're gonna do the checkpoint once per main while loop, which is like the broadest, save checkpoint system that we could have, the least specific, like the least persistent. And then if that works, we can always add more checkpoints later, if we feel like we need to have them. But the big question is, how do we get our data saved to the database in a way that is coherent? Is it... Oh, because I'm not logged in, it doesn't show me my my previous chats or whatever. Okay, it doesn't remember what I asked. Fuck, that sucks because that was a big problem. That's why make sure you're logged in to ChatGPT if you use it, because if you're not logged in, it is not gonna remember what you prompt. Like, it's not gonna have a prompt history and stuff. So, but if you do, you can just go back and look at your previous prompts and stuff. So it's very nice. Okay, so basically ChatGPT, I remember the answer that it gave me, and it was basically the two systems that I had already proposed. One of them being using locals and globals, but locals and globals like doesn't take into account conditionals and stuff. Like, I don't even really know exactly how globals and locals works. Let's see, Python globals / locals for saving all data in a large Python client file. Using globals and locals can give you access to all the variables in the global or local scope as dictionaries. For a large client-side Python file, using these functions to save and restore all data might sound convenient, but it's generally not recommended for a few important reasons. Why be cautious? Security. You might unintentionally include sensitive or irrelevant data like module imports, functions, classes. Stability. Some objects like handle sockets, etc. aren't serializable. Debugging or managing implicit variable collection can get messy. Modifying globals or locals directly can lead to unexpected behavior. Yeah, so it's ruling against that, and honestly, I mean, it's nice to think that I can just use one or two methods, globals and locals, and basically save all my data, and it's like always going to be this predictable set of data, and it's going to be like static. It's not going to change and stuff and be dynamically generated. But from what I'm understanding reading this, it isn't actually that stable and secure, because apparently some objects aren't serializable, and I know that to be the case, like Pygame objects, but I don't necessarily think we have Pygame objects. But yeah, like in the grand, like when you really think about it, saving every single little piece of data, and it sounds simple, but like if the list of saved data doesn't match up specifically one-to-one every time to the associated namespace for each data point, then it's not going to be valid. The whole thing's going to be corrupted, because if you have a list of 100 objects and for whatever reason it only saves like 99 of them, I don't know why, I don't know how it works honestly, but if it's not perfect every time, then P1 name isn't going to refer to P1 name. It would refer to just some completely different object, and there's no way to know like what that is. There's no way. You have the data saved, serialized, but even if you deserialize it, I don't think it like it's not gonna save it with the namespace. I really don't know how that would work, honestly. But ultimately, I'm just thinking, I don't think that system would work. It sounds nice, but I think we would have to do more of a specific system like this, basically creating a list of, or like basically a list of things that need to be saved. And it would have to be if we did it that way, using like the specific list, that means we would pretty much have to go through this client file and we would have to go through this client file and line by line, pretty much, not the entire file, but let's see, basically the entire main while loop for sure, I would say. So from here on, we would have to go line by line and figure out what things need to be saved to the database, and we would have to add in code that function call to save state dot visual data save function or whatever, which actually saves the data to the database. So as we would be going through it, we would be identifying, and it would have to be in the proper order. Well, actually it wouldn't have to be ordered or anything. Well, you know what, now that I think about it, if we're gonna do it that way, like line by line, we could just, since we're saving each data point specifically, then that means yeah, if we're saving each data point specifically, then that means we can just enter in the associated object name per object. So we're just gonna go through every time we find something that needs to be saved. Like for instance, solve disconnect. Let's just say this would be our first one. We would just add a line right under it, which saves solve disconnect to the database. under the object name namespace client.softDisconnect, and that will be saved to the database. It would have the two columns, the object name and then the associated value, which would be false. And then whenever we disconnected and reconnected, we would have our reconnect logic such that we would load back in all the data from the database, and I would have to manually write this, of course, but it would just basically be a function that, I mean, we could use eval, honestly, because eval or execute translates string to an actual code. So, like, there is that idea. But since we're gonna be, it wouldn't take that long, and we could just say, like, for object name in database, and then make like execute object name equals value. But now that I'm thinking about that, I don't know if that actually would work, because let me think about this. I don't know if this would actually work, saving it and restoring it that way. Well, we could have a dictionary of objects with just the value being set to none. I don't know. This is something I'd have to figure out, because, like, ahead of time, because that does determine whether or not we would be able to save it in the way that we're doing it, with the object name as a string and then the value as like a blob or whatever. But yeah, we could just manually write it. Let me open up save logic real quick. Let's see. So we'll just add this in save logic, and we'll say let's just create a new function, and this will be, we'll call it define restore data function. We just call it restore data reconnect function. And what we'll do is we would basically have our master dictionary. We'll say our object dictionary would be well, we would have a list of all the things that got saved. So this is a little, it's not terribly complicated, but I want to make sure I get this right. We could basically grab all of the object names from each object in the database and create a dictionary, or really just a list of each object And then we would have to have a list. We would have to have a master list of all the objects that could be saved, and then compare that with the list of objects that are saved. And when we encounter, basically it would be written like this, like if object name is equal to, and we would just have to go like one by one. We'd have to say if object name is equal to p1.hand, then we would say p1.hand equals associated value. But then there's the alternative method, and that would be using execute or evaluate. And in that case, we would simply we would save under one column. There wouldn't be an object name and then an associated value column. There wouldn't be the two. It would just be one. And that one column would be it would basically be a string that gets executed. Would that work though? I feel like that would work as long as each object already like existed. Like if we did p1 hand equals like if we assign something to a reference of another object, that would be difficult. I mean, that object that references something else would have to be created. Otherwise, we would get an error because, like, let's just say if we are assigning the client the current client.id to refer to client1.id, we have to make sure that when that line runs, client1 ID exists, you know? And I would like to think that that would be the case. So I think what I need to do first is I need to go through and make a list. We're going to make an entire list of the main while loop objects that need to be saved. But honestly, I don't know if doing it like this would work, using the object name and then say an associated value. Well, of course it would. It would just require us having beforehand knowledge of we would just have to have a universal knowledge of every single object that could be saved. Otherwise, we would have data in the database that was saved but like doesn't get restored for whatever reason. So we would just have to have a really long Yeah, we just have to have a universal object name list to iterate through. Yeah, so we would say object list, object name list. We'll call it master object name list. And this would be a list of every single object that could be saved via the main while loop run through. I guess that's a good way to put it. And the master object name list would consist of, you know, we would have P1 hand, P2 hand, all this stuff. And let's see. This is just, you know, a placeholder type deal. And then we'll have, you know, P1 name or whatever. P2 name, etc., etc. And whenever we reconnect, we're going to call this function, and then we're going to iterate, say iterate through each object name in the database. So that means first we have to load in all rows from the object name column from DB, from the stable database. And then number two, we would have to deserialize / convert to Python and then whoa. So actually next we would load them all in, then we would iterate through the list. Well, we would have to grab them all, and it would return basically like a list, I guess. And then we would deserialize and then iterate through the list. I'm not exactly sure which one of those would come first, but we can figure that out. And then after that, while we're iterating through the list of object names from database, we would check well, yeah, then we would check each name against the master object name list. True. True. And then if it matches, Well, this is the tricky part, though. How do you get it to... Well, then you could use exec or eval, right? Then I'm trying to think of a way without using execute or eval. But if let's say P1 hand was the first one in the list, we would compare it to the master object name list. It would match with P1 hand. Okay, it matches with P1 hand, but then what? How do we get it to like intelligently assign the namespace, like P1 hand equal to its associated value? Load in all rows from the object name. We would also have to load in all rows from rows from the values column from stable DB. Deserialize object name list from DB, convert to Python. We'd have to do the same thing with the values list. Well, no, that wouldn't work. We have to... We would have to do it row by row. Yeah, we would have to do it row by row. So we would just load in all rows from the stable database altogether. Not a particular like column. We would just load in all rows from the stable database. Then we would deserialize from database, convert to Python, which at that point it would be like a list of or a dictionary rather, with the object name and then the associated value. I don't know. We'd have to test that. Like, I don't know the exact format. Iterate through the list of deserialize. What format would this be in? A dictionary with the object name as the key and the value as the value. And I don't think it would be. I'm not familiar enough with SQL to know exactly what format this would be in, so need to test this. So depending on what format, like however that gets returned, we need to iterate through the list of elements, whatever they are, however that's formatted, from the database, and we might need to convert it to a dictionary first or whatever, or we'll figure out, you know, that's micro shit, we'll figure that out. And then we would check each name against the master object name list. That is generally true. That is not probably the specific language, but that is generally true. And then if it... See, this is where it gets tricky. Like... I feel like we would have to use execute or eval to to convert it like from a string. I know there's a smart way to do this. Like, there's definitely a dumb way to do this, and there's a smart way to do this, and I don't want to do it the dumb way. I gotta use the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back. I don't want to be a doofus, you know? I'm gonna do it the smart way. Alright, I'm back. Okay. So, we're comparing. We got the object name. It's a string. Then we got the value, and the value is like actual data. It's Python code. It is not a string. So we have to figure out how to make this and I was gonna say, well, couldn't we just save the object name as an actual like Python object? But the way it works is if we did that, we would just be saving like the data that the namespace refers to as the object name, and then the value column would also be the data that the object namespace refers to. So there would actually be no reference to the namespace. Does that make sense? Let me ask ChatGPT this, just on a basic level. Let's say Python using SQLite. I have a save system for client which has a DB with 2 columns, object name as text and value as blob, and I iterate through each object in the client file and save it to the database with the object name as the associated namespace for the value. So I serialize the value and add it to the DB row as a blob. How do I load in the data assigning each object name string as the namespace for the associated deserialized blob object that was associated with each row slash object name? Now it's smart, it's going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Watch, bam. You're putting a lightweight object persistence view in SQLite where each object is stored with its name, object name, and a serialized value. The value is a blob. That's clever and efficient. To load these objects back in your program and dynamically assign them to the same names like player inventory, you'll want to deserialize each blob and inject it into the global namespace. Okay, so because globals and all that uses that's how it assigns stuff. SQLite 3 connect DB path is con cursor for name blob and c execute object pickle load blah blah blah. Target globals at name equals object. So this is perfect, right? This would work. We would pass the name as a string, which it already is a string, to target globals. Wait, hold up. What is this? Target globals dictionary. Say load state passing in globals. What is that? Load state and target globals. You just pass in the globals dictionary itself, they're calling it, and then that will. Oh, and you can use a context manager for SQLite without having to. Damn, I'm a dumbass, man. I didn't even know this, bro. I could have been using the context manager. Doofus. Okay, so we're gonna have to use that. Dummy. Context management for DB. 42425 realized I can use context management for databases the same using with, which auto closes the connections. 4DB is using with, which auto closes the connection. So I should probably use it. Yeah. All right. So we're good. We're good, dude. Context manager DB. Realize I can use context management. Blah 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 blah. Okay. Well. Okay, back to this. Target globals could be globals, locals in some contexts, or a custom dictionary. Avoid using locals for writing outside function scope. Why am I having trouble understanding this? Avoid using locals for writing outside function scope. It won't work properly. Okay, so if you're in the global namespace, you have to use globals. Is that what you're saying, basically? AKA, if in global namespace, have to use globals, not locals. Okay. You can sandbox the objects by loading them into a dedicated state. Could be globals, locals in some context, or a custom dictionary. You can sandbox the objects by loading them into a dedicated state dict instead of polluting the global namespace. I don't know what the fuck that means. What do you mean, chat? What does you mean, chat? Optional, safer namespace injection. If you want to avoid unexpected overwrites, if name in target dictionary. Okay. So for name blob in C execute, select object name value from state. If name is in the target dictionary. Okay, it just gives you the warning. I got you. Okay. Okay, okay. This is true. This is smart. What do we need to do now? Okay, so now if we're gonna do this, which I like this, I like it. It seems good. But we need to make sure we're understanding what globals is exactly. I have never really used global. Like I have, but not much. Okay. Just put this. Put a sample function for loading in data from DB generated by Chat GPT. Alright. And then eventually we would call load state and we would literally just pass in globals. That's what I don't understand. Alright. And then lastly, explain how globals / locals works. Okay, what are globals and locals? You're exactly right in your summary. When assigning variables dynamically, you must use globals if you're in the global namespace because locals won't work as you'd expect for writing variables. Let me break this down clearly. What are globals and locals? Okay, globals returns a dictionary of the global namespace, all global variables and functions in the module. Okay. I'm just like, I'm wondering, is that going to be a problem? I don't think so. It's a big project, dude. There's a lot to consider. Okay, it's not like, do we have functions within client that get called where we're not in the global namespace anymore that we need to save? You know what I mean? To where, oh, I don't know. I don't think we do need, like, I feel like this would be fine. You know what I'm saying? I feel like this would be okay. But wait a second. If we can literally just load in to globals, then doesn't that mean we could just use globals to save everything? You know? Like if we're injecting into the global namespace upon reconnection, then couldn't we just save each data point through globals? But that that wouldn't that wouldn't give us the associated namespaces, you know? It wouldn't. And unless the globals like was static and stuff, maybe it is static. Like, what if we just tried it, you know? What if using globals because globals returns, let's see. What are globals and locals? Design clearly. Global dictionary, the global namespace, all global variables and functions in the module. Locals, a dictionary of the current local namespace, variables within the current function or scope. Both return a reference to a dictionary. So reading and writing work differently depending on the context. So print globals at X. So in the dictionary, the object name is the key in a string, and the value is the associated value. So this is like one-to-one how I would do my database. So it's almost like it was meant to be, dog. It's almost like I was meant to use globals. Writing to locals does not always work. Name Y is not defined. Globals at Z is 30, print Z. Oh, okay, I see. So saying locals at Y equals 20 doesn't actually inject it into the global namespace. So when you try to print it, it doesn't actually print it because it's not actually defined. Okay. In function scope, def test, locals at A equals 10. Print A, name error. B equals 20. Print locals at B works for reading. Why doesn't it work? Because locals inside a function returns a copy of the current local scope. Assigning to it does not change the actual variable bindings. Only the global scope can you modify variables using globals. Okay, that's good to know. Sandboxing. Using state equals dict. When I said sandboxing, I meant loading variables into a dictionary instead of injecting them into the global namespace. I meant loading variables into a dictionary instead of injecting them into the global namespace. This is cleaner and avoids name collisions or accidental overwrites. Instead of load state globals print player, you can do state load state state and then okay, I got you. I see. This keeps your save load logic modular and your environment cleaner. Great for large code bases. Okay, cool. How does globals work with functions, though? Like, how does that work? Globals doesn't just hold variables, it contains everything defined at the module level, including variables, function classes, and imported modules. So yes, it detects functions too, because they're just objects assigned to names in the global namespace. Detects functions too, because they're just objects assigned to names in the global namespace. Print myfunc in globals. Globals and myfunc. Oh, okay. Function in myfunc is globals and myfunc calls a function. Okay. Functions are just named objects. When you define a function, def greet return hi. Python does this behind the scenes. Def temp return hi globals greet is equal to dunder temp. So greet is just a key in the global namespace pointing to a function object. You can save and load functions too. You can detect them using globals and even save their names. You should not try to serialize them with Pickle unless you're using Cloud Pickle or similar. Standard Pickle can't serialize most functions. Filtering just user-defined functions. Serialize them with Pickle unless you're using Cloud Pickle or similar. Standard Pickle can't serialize in most functions. Filtering just user defined. You want to save variables but exclude functions and classes. For name val and global items, if not name starts with and not is instance val types dot function type and not is instance val type. This will skip built-ins, skip functions, and then classes, because classes are of type. It will keep variables. Bruh. Want a full save load utility automatically filters that function has and handle subject is circular. I can drop that in next. Yes, using the exclusions above, but with SQLite 3 Python. Yeah, see, this is what it's doing right here. It's iterating through globals. So it told me not to use globals, but now that I'm understanding, like, you know, and I don't know, like, so let's just think about this. Okay, I feel like this is some simple like Chinese man logic. It's like I don't need to complicate this shit. It's like if it exists at the time of the saving, then it gets saved. If it's a global, then it gets saved. Then we DC, we reconnect, we load from the database and inject back into globals. Bam. We don't have to do anything complicated. It's literally just this. Bam. Right here. You just save the globals to a database and then you load them back in. Like, I know that sounds too easy to be true, but why not? Why would it have to be more complicated than that? So using that system, I don't know, like, if you haven't run, okay, let's see. If you haven't run a part of the file that assigns certain globals when you call the save function, will it still save all globals that would be, or only those that have been executed? You know, does that make sense? It will only save the globals that have already been executed. Anything that hasn't run yet, like a variable inside a function or after a conditional that hasn't triggered, won't exist in globals yet, so it won't be saved. And like, there's not anything wrong with this, is there? I don't think there's anything wrong with this. This is, yeah, you load, you only need what has been executed. That's it. You don't need anything else, because you're restoring it to how it was. You're not restoring it to how it might be, you know? So there's no reason to worry about what might have been. Only worry about what has been. Yeah. So I feel like excited at the fact that this might actually just be simpler than what I was, you know, what I was thinking. What about like when you do this? How would globals recognize that? When a Python script run, it executes line by line. So when you call save globals to DB, it's snapshotting what currently exists in the global scope at that moment, not what could exist if the whole file were to run. If you're using this for a game client or a stable app, make sure to only call the save function after all relevant globals are initialized, or better, pass a control dictionary of objects to save. Yeah, and you know, honestly, I do like the idea of that. The only thing with that is if I miss one, then it's not going to be there. And I don't think this is going to take like a long time to do this. This might take like 1 second to load this stuff in. So, you know, it's not like they're going to have to wait forever for this shit to load. Does this make sense? Like, I feel like using globals to make sure we detect every thing is safer than me manually going through the file and like making a list. Yeah, it means we're gonna save. We're probably gonna save some things that we don't need to save, but it's gonna ensure that we saved everything that needed to be saved. True. So, yeah. If using this for a game planner, save out, make sure to only call the save function after blah 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 blah. Or even better, use a state container that avoids relying on globals at all and gives you explicit control. What about this? How would globals detect these two variables assigned on the same line? When you do client ID, game ID, you're expecting bugs to return super and Python to return something 1, 2, 3. Yes, if the sign has already been executed before the globals call, so okay, it would interpret them 1 to 1. Client ID would be whatever it equals in the game ID. Okay, cool. But if that one is not run yet, you can test it like this. Stuff set up client ID, game ID. Even though the code says there's something only executes. Alright, guys, so I feel like we're just gonna try out using globals. I'm gonna try it out because everything that needs to be saved is gonna exist in here, and it counts imported modules. So well, we might get errors with serialization. I'm thinking like, how do we load in the like card groups? Because that would be like p1.melds. Because we don't actually so if we have this line at the beginning of the client file, and sometimes we append to the p1.card group to add more cards to it. But that happens through a series of functions called from within the client file. Would that data be saved since it is associated with the P1 module object that we imported globally, or would we have to locally access this data and save it through locals or something into Python namespaces and object mutability. Your importing object likely consists of player from the player module. These names are now assigned in your global namespace. If you mutate those objects, like P1 card group pen, you are mutating the actual object, not reassigning P1, correct? So will it be saved? If you call save globals to DB or look into globals, P1 and P2 are just references to the player instances that were imported. Since Python passes objects by reference, if you change them, mutate, that change is reflected in the same object. This will save the current state of P1, including its card group. So any mutation in P1 or its contents will be captured as long as you save P1 after the mutation. Damn, which you don't need. You don't need locals. P1 is already in globals after the import. You don't need to reassign P1 or its card group for it to stick. Important caveat. If you re-import P1 or re-execute the import line again later, it will reset the reference to the original object from player volume. Listen to great changes unless you're careful not to re-import out of mutation. If you re-import P1 or re-execute the import line again later, reset the reference to the original object from player. Listen to great changes unless you're careful. Damn, that's awesome, bro. That's good news. Wow. Copy that code. Saving global state. Mode. All right, that's good progress. I'm happy with it. I think we may have figured out a solution, and it is like, I'm just gonna be honest. If we can go with this simple ass solution, this globals, that is gonna be so easy. And I'm actually hopeful after reading all the details on how this works. Like, I think it actually could work just completely as our save system, and the load system. Like, and honestly, that might just be the one checkpoint to rule them all. Like, we probably won't even need more checkpoints. So, straight up, um, like, that's awesome. So does that mean like we don't even need the custom append list functions and stuff? Maybe. I don't know. I don't. I'm like, I hate to say it, but we might not even need the this function that we made. Not the, we do need stable save state. We do need the save DB setup, but this one, custom append list, that one we might get rid of. We might not need it. Because if globals captures what it currently is, it very well, you know, it might work, which means we wouldn't fucking need this function at all, which means I wasted my time. This is probably like 5 hours of work. I mean, I don't care though. It is what it is. Like, if we found a better way that I just did not think globals would work like that, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe it won't work like that. Maybe it's not that simple. If it's not that simple, it'll kind of suck because that makes life harder for me. But if it if it is that simple, that's great. If it's not that simple, then we have code in place for that, which would be like this function would be one of them. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not gonna look at it anymore. We'll do tomorrow. I'm like kind of tired. I got brain fog from being sick. I don't feel very good right now, and I kind of just want to chill. So that's gonna be it. But I'm pretty hopeful. We might have a really simple solution, and if this is as simple as I'm thinking it could be, man, we might be done with this system like way faster than I thought. This means we wouldn't have to have any specific reconnect logic. It would literally just load the globals in like one-to-one. No picking and choosing, just bam bam. If it was there, load it. If it wasn't, don't. It's not there. It's that simple. If it's there, it saves it. When you reconnect, if it was there, it loads it. It's that simple. And that's beautifully simple. Like, that's what you want in programs. Simple, easy. So that's the goal. And that basically chops off like a month of work that I thought I had to do. Straight up. At least 10 days. So we might have just gained like 10 days, dude. We'll see. Alright, but I'm going to go ahead and peace out. So y'all have a